Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is your tropical update for September 21st. We have a lot to talk about. 5 storms, almost all of them affecting land in one way or another. Of course, a major Category 4 hurricane, severe tropical storm Gaston, Invest 98 and 99L, and an area of interest likely to form off the coast of Africa in a highly unusual way. Before we get started, funny. Okay, now, the impact map, that's about the only laughing we're going to be doing today because as you can see, it is a crowded and very highlighted impact map once again today. Fiona making its way from the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos up north towards Bermuda. It's going to go to the north and west of Bermuda, which is good, still bringing potential hurricane impacts to the island, as well as later on as it moves further to the north, impacts likely throughout much of Canada, Atlantic Canada, Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, New Brunswick, as well as portions of perhaps Maine as well. Far eastern Maine could receive some extraneous impacts due to the storm. Again, like yesterday, I'll show you a wind map of how the wind field is going to expand with Fiona as we move on with time. But as you can see here, remember, those orange areas are hurricane force winds. Yellow is going to be those stronger gale force, tropical storm force winds. Green is tropical storm force, and the blue is extraneous impacts. Due to 98L down here in the Atlantic, we have a lot to watch out for. Most urgently, of course, is the coast of Venezuela, Colombia, the ABC Islands, portions of the Windward Islands over the next few days. And as we move on with time, we're going to watch Jamaica, Honduras, Nicaragua, Cayman Islands, as well as far eastern Cuba, perhaps even all of Cuba before it's all said and done. Gaston, we're keeping an eye on the Azores there for potential impacts as that storm moves. Also, of course, 98L or 99L likely to form, and the one behind that could form as we move on with time. Gaston's notated a little bit too far to the north on this graphic, and so I apologize for that. Let's begin with Fiona. Fiona having itself a time. It looks like a big old major hurricane. No surprise there. Clear eye like I predicted it would have yesterday. Tropical storm warning and hurricane watch in effect for the island of Bermuda. I expect that we could see alerts for Canada. Now, here's kind of where it gets into a gray area is it probably won't be a tropical cyclone by the time it makes landfall in Canada, but it might be. And of course, as we learned from Hurricane Sandy in 2011, is that these storms can move to the north as super strong hurricanes growing in size, big wind fields, and then they become non-tropical. And now, because of Sandy, the policy is to keep the warnings and watches in place, even if that does happen. So if watches or warnings are issued for Canada, they will be maintained regardless of what Fiona does in terms of being tropical or not. But nonetheless, a strong, large hurricane making its way up towards Atlantic Canada, and regardless of whether or not it's a hurricane, it will be a hurricane force, low pressure system that is very large. A few of the European, the UK models bring Fiona to a Category 5. I'm not thinking that's going to happen, along with the majority of the other models. We keep it at a Cat 4, perhaps maybe reaches mid-strength Cat 4 before decreasing as it moves up into the northern portions of Canada, as I meant, the Atlantic portions of Canada, as I mentioned. Once again, let's take a look at the graphical representation of this Friday morning, early Friday morning. That is, hurricane force winds are possible on the island of Bermuda, but certainly tropical storm force winds beyond a shadow of a doubt. Again, I'll take my cursor. Here is the island of Bermuda right here on the edge of those hurricane force winds. Again, tropical storm force is green, hurricane force is purple. And so that's how we know what to look out for in terms of that. Those red winds are when we get to gale force. And I believe, it's not a big enough wind field to show you guys where the major hurricane force winds are at on this graphic. As it moves on with time, as you see, by the time it rockets up to the north, again, it only takes one day. Friday morning, it's in Bermuda. Saturday morning, it's up in Nova Scotia. and by then it makes landfall as either a hurricane or a hurricane force low, with tropical storm force winds all the way from far eastern Maine to far eastern Newfoundland. So again, a very large storm. I'm not sure how large that is off the top of my head, but lucky for me, I might be able to get it up as I'm speaking. From far eastern Maine to far eastern Newfoundland is about 700 miles. So this thing is going to be about 700 miles in diameter of tropical storm force winds by the time it makes it this far north, which is absolutely insane. Severe tropical storm Gaston making its way towards the Azores, as we can see here on the cone. It brings it near the Azores, then down south and meanders in that area. It kind of hits a wall, is what a lot of the guidance has been saying on this storm. So it hits a wall there. It won't go any further, and then it'll kind of loop and meander around as a non-tropical cyclone. Nonetheless, tropical storm force winds are possible for the Azores. I would not be surprised if tropical storm watches or warnings are issued shortly for those areas, as by Thursday evening, at the earliest, we could see tropical storm force winds in that location. Here's 98L, not looking fantastic. We'll have an aircraft in it later tonight to investigate how the storm is doing. As you can tell, it's not, like blow me away in terms of organization. But nonetheless, there is convection and a very vigorous tropical wave with a 90% chance of formation within the next 5 days. It'll make its way into the Caribbean Sea, where it will likely develop. And this thing we will be talking about for the next week, guaranteed, probably the next 2 weeks, guaranteed, as it will make its way through the Caribbean, affect areas throughout the Caribbean, and then perhaps impact portions more close to home, one might say, like South Florida or eastern Cuba or the Yucatan. And as soon as you hear eastern Cuba and Yucatan and hurricane in the same sentence, you know that it's quite possible that a United States impact is shortly to follow. And so this storm is no different, as we can see here. At this point, models differ greatly in terms of where this storm exactly is going to end up. Is it going to end up in Nicaragua and Honduras, or is it going to end up in eastern Cuba and South Florida? We'll kind of have to tell with time. Some of these models bring this storm into a rapidly strengthening category 4 hurricane, which is certainly possible later in the storm's life. But as for now, I would consider the major thing we need to look at is how long does it take for this thing to form. Certain models have this thing developing tonight. Other models have this developing in about 3 or 4 days from now. Based off of its current presentation, I don't think it's a next day sort of thing. It might be 2 or 3 days. So somewhere in the middle. And that seems to be the consensus among many meteorologists at this point. By the time it's south of Jamaica, it's almost certain that this thing is a tropical cyclone, likely a tropical storm. And again, it has the opportunity from there to strengthen. It may not go off the walls in terms of strengthening. But again, then we want to watch eastern Cuba, portions of Florida, the Yucatan, and who knows what else. But it's way, way too far out to discuss potential impacts down the line. It's just something to be aware of. It is hurricane season, and we do have a system moving into the Caribbean that could, down the line, have impacts to various countries. And so just be aware of that. Invest 99L, located over the central Atlantic today, with a 30% chance of formation within the next 5 days. Nothing too crazy here, but, it's hurricane season. Behind that, we have an area of interest, which is highly unusual, making its way up the coast of Africa from south to north. I don't think anybody has uttered those words before this system became a thing. 50% chance formation within the next 5 days. A decent amount of model support with this. Very odd track, but, it is what it is. As we see here on the European ensembles, a variety of solutions 7 days from now with 98L. Again, anywhere from Honduras and Nicaragua all the way to South Florida or even further north than that. Severe tropical storm Gaston makes its loop like we've been talking about. The area of interest off the coast of Africa forms. 99L kind of has a party by itself. And Fiona does its thing too. GFS telling much the same story. Again, a huge amount of spread with 98L. I can't stress this enough. There's so much diversity in what to expect out of 98L. We don't know what's going to happen yet, but it's hurricane season, and it's a storm in the Caribbean. So people who live down there know what that means. They know that the potential exists. And I'm saying the potential exists on 98L to do whatever. So let's just consider that. Again, continue to monitor Fiona. Fiona is our first thought. As soon as that hits Atlantic Canada, though, all eyes are going to shift to 98L. Of course, Gaston, if you're in the Azores, you're watching that very closely. And I guess if you're in Cabo Verde or the coast of Africa, you're going to watch that area of interest closely. But that's all I have for today. It was a lot, so I guess I shouldn't really say that's all for today. But yeah, it's getting busy, and there are a lot of things for us to watch, and a lot of areas that need to be keeping their eye on the current tropical weather. That's all for now. Chris Sixton for their Catholic video.